with virtual reality, not only we can create this co-presence to really study peer effects, we can also share the software with colleagues, right? So that really helps with open science and the replicability of research.
For now, we cannot tell, is it maybe that if you are high or low on short-term mindset, you're more reactive to your social environment in general? Or are you more reactive just to negative peer influence? Our target group is adolescents, as adolescence is a wild period, a wild developmental period. A lot is going on. Our brain is maturing. We have a lot of unsupervised contact that we didn't have before. And so we're just especially vulnerable to what our social environment is doing and saying.
But in the two-player condition where there is the cheating prompt, what we see is 64% of participants reported a high score to get the bonus.
You're listening to Doing Time, Talking Crime, a podcast that showcases the work being conducted at the Max Planck Institute for the Study of Crime, Security and Law in Freiburg, Germany. My name is Christopher Murphy, and I'll be talking to researchers from the fields of criminology, psychology and law. All this and more on Doing Time, Talking Crime. Welcome back to Doing Time, Talking Crime. Today we're diving into the world of peer dynamics to find out how social circles influence and shape the decisions that we make. To do so, I'm joined by two of my own peers, Yikang Zhang and Linda Rosar. Yikang and Linda are from the Department of Criminology, and they're undertaking groundbreaking research on the topic. Yikang and Linda, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on. So we have heaps and heaps. We always have heaps and heaps to discuss on Doing Time, Talking Crime. So yeah, let's get straight to it. Yikang, I guess studying peer dynamics is not something new to the world of criminology. What are the gaps then that you're trying to fill in the existing research?
As you said, Chris, peer research has existed for decades, and many papers have discussed or even found evidence that peers play an important role in crime and delinquency, especially among young people. What we are interested in at this moment is to look at the in-the-moment decision-making. And we also feel like perhaps trained as psychologists, we are particularly equipped to look at this, because if you look at criminological literature, look at peer influence, it's very often with cross-sectional or longitudinal surveys. These retrospective measures, they do not really give us insight into what goes into the decision in the moment. But as psychologists, we can set up experiments and monitor people's decisions, and then also later quickly ask what was the factors influencing our decisions, right? So I think that's something we can uniquely offer. Trained as psychologists, although now we are working in a criminological department, so I would say we are somewhat interdisciplinary. I think that's a buzzword, but I feel like we should be qualified as such. Another thing that I think we can bring into the literature is to investigate some of the forgotten or overlooked dynamics in peer research. One thing we found interesting is peer selection, or exactly how peer selection and influence work together, how are they connected. We think that with experimental methods, we can also shed light on how selection can be seen or examined from the perspective, for example, as a response to unwanted influence, right? Or through selection that we can actually curate our social networks to avoid unwanted influence. Another important aspect of peer selection is through selection, we are exposed to either delinquent or non-delinquent peers, which across time would influence our beliefs and values. So this kind of socialization or internalization. So we think selection is something that we should be looking at.
Okay. And so that's what you're suggesting there is your previous studies have often been more in the past, retrospective, which peers did I hang out with at school? Why did that lead me to where I am now? Whereas you're looking very much at the here, at the present, and being able to use, and this, my next question, I guess, is virtual reality is the method you're using, like many of the criminologists in the department, to assess peer responses. Tell us a little bit about this novel approach.
So virtual reality is not very new method, but is quite new to apply it in the study of peer research. So what we do is we invite friend dyads into the lab, create avatar for the friends, and then they enter the virtual environment. They can see each other's avatar. Then in this environment, they have opportunities to engage in rule-breaking behavior. For example, in our current experiment is cheating. And participants enter the environment are randomly allocated to different conditions. Some are neutral conditions, right? So they just play a game, and in the game there are certain rule-breaking opportunities. In other conditions, they will receive ostensibly from their friend a message encouraging them to break the rules. We want to see how exactly this simple prompt, a very minimal prompt, would influence their rule-breaking behavior. These things is not impossible to test without VR, but with VR is much more ecologically valid. Because in VR it's much easier for us to create this co-presence, right? I am doing something together with my friend, and in the environment it's just us. There's no observers. So that also mimics the real-life situations, like criminogenic situations, where you are engaging in some social activities with your friend, and then there are opportunities or situational influences pushes you toward making certain maybe bad decisions.
And you find that then the people can, or you've obviously had subjects, is that the term you use for your...
Participants.
Participants, that's better, that's right. So participants who then step into the VR, put on the headsets, and they'd give the feedback that they felt that they were in this world and that they were acting with their friend.
In our current data collection, we tested 248 participants. So basically close to 130 pairs. We measure their presence, so how they feel in the environment. Is it more or less realistic? And the co-presence, right? Do they think or do they feel that they are in the same environment with their friends? And results show that all participants report a adequate level of presence, so above the midpoint of the measuring scale. For the two conditions where participants are playing the game together in the virtual environment with their friends, the co-presence score is also above midpoint. We also have another condition, the single-player condition. Participants take photos, and we create avatar for them. Then they go into the virtual environment, but in the virtual environment, it's just themselves. In this game, or in this condition, what we see is, of course, participants report lower co-presence scores, but that's kind of like consistent with our design, right?
That's because they're by themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would say, so far, we think the setup works.
Okay,
yeah?
Well, that's good to hear. Well, I've talked about the setup, we've talked about why you're using VR and the kind of gaps you're trying to fill. You mentioned there the projects, and I know from having our little chat beforehand that you're doing 3 projects at the moment. Would you like to run us through, I guess, very briefly, those 3 projects, and then we'll go into each project with maybe 1 or 2 more questions in a little detail. So I'll hand it back over to yourselves to decide who wants to tell me about the 3 projects.
Okay, then I think I will continue.
Okay.
And since we started talking about VR, the virtual reality experiment is the first study we started. We finished data collection in Freiburg, but we're also running parallel data collection in Maryland together with our collaborator, with Jacobson and Sylvia Sun.
Mm-hmm. And they're using the same programs then?
Yes, exactly. Okay. That's another point I want to mention as well. With virtual reality, not only we can create this co-presence to really study peer effects, we can also share the software with colleagues, right? And once they get software, they set things up, their experimental manipulation, the setup will be exactly like ours. So that really helps with open science and the replicability of research, especially in social sciences. As we all know, maybe not all of us, 1.5 decades ago, there was a very big thing in psychology or psychological research. Many of the findings cannot be replicated. And in our department, we are very much pro-open science. We want to contribute to the betterment of scientific research. And we think virtual reality or sharing of virtual reality materials can be one way that we can contribute to the cause.
Sure, that absolutely makes sense. And I mean, it obviously makes it easier to get more and more people as well, the more participants. I mean, the more institutes you're sharing it with, the more participants you can get doing that study. Okay.
Yes.
And it obviously also allows us to have like a diversified participant pool, because as you've talked about it in one of your previous episodes with Patrick, you can go into prisons, for example, and use the exact same paradigm that you already have inside a prison. And normally this would be problematic because you cannot take prisoners out of the prison to then have them carry out an experiment in your lab.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, right. I see. So it's basically you've got a little experiment in a suitcase with your VR and a computer or a laptop, and then you can take that wherever. Yeah.
Doesn't fit in a suitcase yet.
It doesn't fit in a suitcase. Oh, okay. Yikang, you were telling me about the first project.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sardinia.
So for Sardinia. Yes. That's the name.
Sardinia, like the island.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Jean-Louis was in Sardinia for a holiday. That's why he named the game also Sardinia.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So the second project, as we mentioned earlier, is to look at the selection process, how selection and influence intersect. And in this line of research, I created like a mind game. This mind game basically is an investment game. Participants are given a few objects that they can choose, but they are not asked to log in their choice. Once they say, I have made my decision, I will show them all the payoffs associated with each object. And then now they can report. And this gives the opportunity for them to randomly pick the largest one, right? Because
right. So they see the objects beforehand, and then they're told to pick one, and then the actual cash value is revealed for the object.
Yes.
And then they're allowed to say what they actually chose.
Yeah, so this is the core of the setup. So how do we introduce the peer influence part? To do that, I created a two-person game. So participants will first see another player play the game. They will see in each round which option or what amount of payoff the other participant would report. And if participants are playing with an honest partner, probably the options they report would be somewhat random, right? Sometimes lower, sometimes higher.
Sure. Because they're not changing their answer afterwards, the value is revealed. Okay.
Yes. But if you're playing with a dishonest partner, you probably would see consistently reporting the highest.
Because the dishonest player is reporting the highest, and maybe the peer, this is depending then, I guess, is the peer dynamics of the question, whether the peer says, ooh, hang on, I think I'm going to start cheating as well.
Yeah. So participants see how their peer behave, then they themselves have to make the decisions. And then we could see if people behave differently if they're in different conditions, right? If they're exposed to either an honest peer or dishonest peer. So this is the influence part. So how do we encourage selection into the process? So what I did is participants play the game with the peer for a few rounds, and then in the end, they can make a decision to play with the same person for the next few rounds, or switch away and play with a different partner.
And this is still the second project, or this is the third one?
This is still the second one.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have one component, peer influence, and the other component, peer selection.
Yes.
And we try to combine them into the same experiment. So to recap, participants can see how their peers behave, and then they behave themselves, or they make decisions themselves. And then in the end, they also have to make another decision if they want to continue to play with their peers or switch away. So we iterate this process a few times, and then in the end, we want to look at, for example, peer influence. Do people who play with an honest peer also behave more honestly in the game? Selection. Do people who are more honest, for example, through self-report measures, are less likely to stay with a dishonest peer, are more likely to stay with honest peer? So this is the second project. And then the third project, I will leave that for Linda because that's part of her PhD project.
Okay, well, Linda, we've got about 5 minutes until our break. So do you want to do a deeper dive into your project first, and then we'll come back to Sardinia and Excellenza?
Yes.
After the break. Yeah.
Yes.
So Go for it.
Of course. So as I mentioned, the idea will be to also look at the short-term mindsets component in the peer processes. And so maybe to fresh up your brain on what is short-term mindset,
yeah, please
what do we mean if we say short-term mindset? So it's just the general tendency to focus on the immediate payoff and to disregard longer-term consequences. So, for example, if you're out with your friends and they want to shoplift something, you are prone to indulge in this behavior because you have like very short-term outcomes, which would be the social gain, but also the materialistic gain, and you disregard the consequences. So maybe to get an entry into your police records. And this idea of short-term mindsets is captured in the short-term mindset theory, which extends previous theories that were really predominant in the field of criminology. And the important aspect about this theory is that it allows short-term mindsets to change over the lifetime, because previous criminological theories have captured certain tendencies as being rather rigid. And as we know from psychology, this is not really the case, as we as humans just evolve throughout our lifetime. It further also captures the idea that we have traits, but we also have states of certain personality traits. So for example, trait-like is more stable, but state-like is like in the moment. And,
okay, so we're born with certain personality traits, but
yes,
the states that we're in at one given moment can change.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And this is also captured in this short-term mindset theory, which is rather novel to the field of criminology. And lastly, a short-term mindset theory also assumes that not only does a certain trait lead to a certain outcome, but also that a certain outcome will feed back into a certain trait. So if you are low on self-control and you commit a crime, then this committing a crime will also lead to low self-control again. So it's a reciprocity that is assumed. It's not only self-control, but it's rather a pool of previously established criminogenic traits that are all captured under this umbrella term of short-term mindsets. The thing is that all these traits that have previously been established, they seem to be highly intercorrelated. So they're distinct, but still kind of intercorrelated. And we believe that there might be this underlying factor that unifies them, which is short-term mindsets.
Okay.
And why we think it's interesting to implement this in the paradigms that Yikang has just described is that the idea of short-term mindsets has been present in the past literature. So it has been there, but it has never really been looked at as like the influence or the explaining role in delinquency, especially with regards to peer dynamics.
Okay.
So this is kind of the novelty
sure.
that we're trying to introduce. Mm-hmm. And how do we want to do that? Well, we're going to look at it with regards to peer selection effects, also peer influence, and we would also like to see whether it might be a viable target for possible interventions.
I was going to ask what the long-term goal,
yes.
That's right. I mean, research has to serve a purpose. Well, obviously the aim is to have something we can work with. So that's the idea as well, then, to see what kind of interventions could stop someone from reacting with a certain peer that's not a good influence on them.
Exactly.
Okay.
And of course, you need to be careful when testing interventions like this, because for now, we cannot tell, is it maybe that if you are high or low on short-term mindset, you're more reactive to your social environment in general, or are you more reactive just to negative peer influence? Because if it would be the first case, then maybe having an intervention that just targets at reducing short-term mindset might also take away the pro-social, so the positive peer influence. So yes, this is something we still need to look at. And in general, our target group is adolescents, as adolescence is a wild period, a wild developmental period. A lot is going on. Our brain is maturing. We have a lot of unsupervised contact that we didn't have before. And so we're just especially vulnerable to what our social environment is doing and saying.
That's right. And I guess the short-term and fun aspects in that play maybe a greater role than when you're a parent, midlife or whatnot. I guess, as I say, it's an interesting group to study.
Definitely,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. We'll go to a short break now, and then I'll be back with Yikang and Linda after the break, and we're going to talk about the other two projects in a little bit more detail. You're listening to Doing Time, Talking Crime, a podcast by the Max Planck Institute for the Study of Crime, Security and Law. Welcome back to Doing Time, Talking Crime. I'm joined today by Linda and Yikang, and we're discussing peer dynamics. Now, before the break, Linda, you gave us a little rundown there on the short-term mindsets project you're working on. But I know we also, Yikang, you said at the start, there's 3 projects. So let's maybe look then at the projects or studies, but let's look at the second one, which is the VR simulation of a quiz game. What's happening here and why are you doing it?
So we are running a VR experiment to study the in-the-moment decision-making of rule-breaking behavior and the role of peer influence. As I already mentioned earlier, the procedure is basically we invite friends to come to the lab, and then we take a photo of them to create an avatar for the virtual environment. Participants enter the virtual environment, and then in some conditions, they can see each other's avatar in the environment. They play the quiz game together. The quiz game is also a mind game, so they are not asked to log in their answer, but after the time has passed, we review the answer, we ask, did you guess this correctly or not?
Mm-hmm. So this is not the one with the investment value. That's the third one study.
Yes.
But this is okay. So this is actually a quiz. They're being asked a question.
Yes.
And then you ask them at the end, did you get the answer right or not?
But it's like a similar idea, right? So
Yes.
through self-report, people can cheat, which they shouldn't do. Basically, the idea is to incentivize cheating. We say if you get a real high score, if you answer like many questions correctly, you get to split 30 euros with your friend. So on top of your experiment payment. But what we did is we piloted the questions before the experiments, and it's basically impossible for people to get to that score without cheating. So that's how we measure cheating in the experiment.
Some of the questions are really difficult then.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So the procedure is participants start or like enter the virtual environment. They get familiar with the environment, play with the objects in the environment, talk to their friends. First, they can talk to each other with the mic, and they also can type messages to each other. But gradually, we will reduce the level of communication. So in the beginning, they can talk through mic. Then later, they can only send one message to each other with a text. That's also part of the cover story. So you can get the help from your friend during the quiz, right? And the first 2 rounds is not playing for money, right? They just kind of like get a feel. And then in the final round, they play the game for money. And then the manipulation peer influence comes in. In some conditions, participants receive the one help message from their friend saying, just press green. I know now this sounds like a bit weird why I mention this, because if you press green button, that you're saying, I guessed it correctly or I know the answer.
Yes, okay. So
So basically the idea is there is a very minimal prompt from the friend saying, just say you know the answer so we can get the money, right? That's the
okay. And you are kind of
implication.
acting as a team as well, basically. The idea is you get 30 euros as a team.
Yes.
Okay, so there is that kind of pressure, if you will, to perform.
Yes. In the other conditions, as we mentioned earlier, there are also conditions participants play the game together, but they don't receive this pro-cheating message, right? They would receive instead also a preset message from the friend that, the questions are very difficult. So it's a very neutral message, doesn't really impact the behavior. In the single-player condition, of course, they are playing the game separately, and they don't receive a message from each other.
And the message, though, they're receiving, that's not actually from the friend, or it is from the friend. No, it's not.
It's not. What we did is the moment they start to play the round for money, we separate them into playing 2 separate games. Both of them think that they are playing the quiz, their friend is there observing to help, and then we take over the friend's avatar and send the message to both of them. That doubles our participants' data because we are not only using one person from the pair, and also increase the experiment control.
Ah, sneaky. Okay, so the bot kind of mixes things up and then starts giving them prompts to say, hey, come on, just press green.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
And
okay.
maybe you're wondering, like, why do they not realize that it's not their friend?
Mm-hmm.
But one thing is that within the VR environment, it's really difficult to chat. So I don't know if this was actually made on purpose or if it was created that way or if it's just the environment itself. But of course, we tried it out ourselves. And if you try to press on certain keys on your keyboard, it's just like very difficult to press the right one.
Okay.
So that makes it even more credible that your peer is writing you a message and why you cannot write really back because the time frame is just too short for you to actually produce a text
and
message.
so actually the peers or the friends, they're actually not in the same room either. They're in separate rooms whilst this is taking place. Okay.
Yes.
Can you ask me one of the questions? I'd like to see if I can answer it.
What is the name of the rocket ship in Interstellar? You have 4 answer options, actually.
Oh, okay. Oh. And I'm going to have to cheat. I don't know the answer.
Well, it's Endurance.
Endurance. Oh, I have seen the movie, but look, see, then I would already be cheating to get that money. Okay. And is that one of the easier questions or the harder questions?
I felt it was one of the easier ones, given that you see the 4 answer options on screen. So I feel like if you've watched the movie before, maybe, but then there's really difficult questions with like sports events. So it's also like what type of like field of knowledge are you really knowledgeable?
Okay, yeah. And you have some random events there.
Yeah, it's like when did the women's soccer team win a certain cup?
Okay, right.
I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
I
okay,
wouldn't
so
know.
as you were saying, it's pretty much impossible to get everything right.
Yes.
If you'd asked about Star Trek, I think I would have got that one. But hey, I'm a different generation. So then what have you found out so far about whether peers cheat or not?
We do have very strong effects for the different conditions. In the 2-player condition where there is no cheating prompt, and also in the single-player conditions, around 20% of the participants report a high score that leads to the €30 bonus.
And that would correlate with a normal, this is what someone could get 20% would maybe get these answers correct, or they're cheating.
I think maybe also a lower level of cheating
Lower
present.
level cheating, okay.
But in the 2-player condition where there is the cheating prompt, what we see is 64% of participants reported a high score to get the bonus.
Okay, so you're really seeing a peer dynamic here taking place.
44% difference.
Okay, when they're being prompted to cheat. Okay, and that is what you would call statistically significant.
That was very, very significant.
Okay. So you're quite happy with the results and how the study's been planned then?
For that part, yes. But we also found some unexpected findings. For example, we didn't see many statistically significant correlations with self-report measures like, for example, personality measures or self-reported delinquency in the past 12 months. And we're also trying to figure out what is going on. One reason we think could be is the situational influence is too strong, therefore overshadowing the self-report correlation. And in social psychology and the personality psychology, it's not uncommon to have low correlations between self-report measures and behavioral tasks. So it's something that is unexpected, but also not unexpected or like
surprising.
Not surprising. Yeah, exactly. We also think maybe it's the measurement order that had an impact. So we first ask participants to play the game, then we ask self-report measures. Maybe their behaviors in the game influence the self-report. Unfortunately, in Maryland, where we are continuing the collection, we use the same procedure, so we cannot really test that part, but at least we can see if the same results hold for 2 testing sites. And later, if others want to join our project as a collaborator and test, then maybe we can twist the order of measurement and see if
that's what you're saying. That's
change.
a great thing, I guess, with the methods you're using, that it is possible. What do people say, or what do the friends say afterwards? You obviously do a little debrief, and then they're like, we were lying to you. That wasn't me. That was the bot. Are they surprised? Are they angry? Do they take their money and run?
I must say I'm not very involved in the testing myself because we do the testing in German and I do not speak German yet. So what we do is to have research assistant do the testing. Based on their experience, I think people couldn't realize that in the environment it was not their friend. And you also see a certain level of justification after hearing the debriefing. So people would claim, for example, they are really good at answering the quizzes. That's why they got a high score.
Interstellar is their favourite film. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, now we've talked about this project which uses friends. I'd like to talk about the third one, which uses not enemies, but unknown. You're dealing with people who don't know each other before going into the project, and this is the one with the betting on certain values of items. So yeah, give us a rundown on what's going on there, and then once you've done that, I'd be particularly interested to know whether you're seeing a difference between the project with the friends and the one where you're using anonymous partners.
So for the third project, or the project we look at selection and influence together, as I mentioned earlier, I designed a new mind game based on previous paradigms, and with the cover story of like this is an investment game, and participants can see the other person's behavior, and then we want to see if this modeling aspect would influence participants' own behavior, and then they are given the choice to switch partners after playing a few rounds, and this is to see if there is certain homophily dynamic going on, where the people who are similar to each other would more likely to stay with each other. The exact experiment setup is like this. We recruit participants online. So participants first sign up for the experiment, then they play a single-player game after practice. So in this case, we want to measure the baseline of cheating. So how likely they are to report high payoff choices in the absence of any peers from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. And you do this with the single person or with all kinds of people, and then you develop a baseline across all the participants.
Yeah, all participants start with the single-player game where they see the objects.
It's an individual baseline then?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
They see the non-objects and then they report the payoffs. And some people already start to cheat during the baseline, others are honest. And then they start the two-player games. As we discussed earlier, they are paired with each other. They first have a chat with each other to increase the credibility of the experiment manipulation. But once they finish the chat, actually similar to the VR experiment, we ask them to play, or like we manipulate them to play different separate games with the like predefined bot with like predefined behavior.
Mm-hmm.
One bot is behaving consistently honest, so it reports the payoffs based on the probabilities of the options. The other one consistently reports the highest payoff across all rounds.
Okay.
And then participants, of course, would first see these bots report, and then they themselves report, right? And after...
And they think, though, that they're playing with the
person they
chatted to beforehand. Okay.
Yes.
And that person's actually playing a game with another bot.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, we do a lot of lying in our experiments.
I can see.
So after this collaborative game, participants need to decide if they want to stay with the partner or switch to a different one. Before that, we ask some state measures. For example, how comfortable they feel about cheating. Do they expect their partner to cheat in the game? And what's their beliefs about their partner's expectations? Do I feel like my partner expects me to cheat, right? And then they make the switch decision.
Okay.
And this takes maybe, if my memory is correct, 6 times. So they make 6 decisions if they want to switch or to stay.
Now they're asked on 6 different occasions, and okay, and so maybe at the beginning they're feeling still, I'm comfortable with this partner, but maybe if they're a person who's particularly honest and then they're with a dishonest partner, particularly dishonest, then they may switch away.
Yeah.
Feel uncomfortable. Yeah.
So after the 2-player games, they again play the single-player game to measure a updated behavioral tendency. So what we found is, of course, there's a very strong effect of peer influence, modeling behavior. If you're playing with a dishonest peer, you're also more likely to cheat in the game. We also see very strong evidence for selection. Maybe very strong is the wrong word, but quite robust evidence. For example, we see self-report measure honest humility is a personality dimension, like indicating how, as the name suggests, honest you are as a person generally. People who score high on this dimension, they are more likely to switch away from a dishonest partner and stay with the honest partner. So if we look at the number of rounds played with a dishonest versus honest peer, we see the more honest you are, the fewer rounds you play with a dishonest peer.
Okay, so we are seeing this birds of a feather flock together.
Yes.
Dynamic.
What's even more interesting is in the second single player game, at the end of the experiment, right, we see that the number of rounds you played with a dishonest peer predicts cheating in that game. Even though in that game you're playing just by yourself. So in the absence of peer presence, you're still like this exposure to delinquent peers still predicts cheating.
Okay. And even if the delinquent peer is your friend, is there a difference there then? For instance, with the strangers and the friends, I mean, is there a difference who's delinquent?
Very good question. So I forgot to mention that part earlier. In the online experiment with the selection, we recruited participants who don't know each other, right? All they did is chat with each other for maybe 2 minutes at the beginning of the experiment. But we do find very similar patterns or similar effects of peer influence. As discussed earlier, in the VR experiment, 64% of participants cheated in the cheating prompt condition, while the other conditions only reported 20% participants reporting high payoff options. So you see a 44% difference. In the online experiments, the percentage of high payoff choices in the dishonest condition is around 70%. In the honest condition, it's around 30%. So you also see a 40% difference.
Okay.
This may be a coincidence, but I do find it's very interesting that we see. Yeah.
Okay, but the online one, they're even more likely to cheat, basically, than in the real, or not real world, but the one where they're in the VR lab and have to maybe talk to people afterwards as well. I wonder if that also plays an influence, right? Online, it's anonymous. I don't have to go and I get the money transferred to me or whatnot, and then whereas otherwise at the end I have to go and collect it from so-and-so and maybe talk about the decisions I made.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think what is really interesting as well is that we have this mini socialization effect kind of. So playing with the delinquent partner leads to enduring delinquency even when that partner is absent. Of course, I said mini because it's like on a very, very short time scale. But I think that's already something and really interesting.
Yeah, certainly. That's right. And how long do you think, you mentioned that some of the research has already been wrapped up here in Freiburg and now it's in Maryland, and then you were going to wait for that, the results there, and then put it all together?
Yes.
Okay.
So we are waiting for the colleagues in Maryland to finish the data collection so we can have a bigger sample and to run more interesting analysis. In the VR experiment, not only we measured some personality measurements like we discussed earlier, we also measured demographic information, for example, their own education level, their parents' education level, their subjective social status. We also measure their peer network, especially interesting to the Partners in Crime project. Also, the co-offending between the participant and the friend they brought.
Okay.
So these things will also later be analyzed with the larger sample.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, of course. When you say it, I'm like, well, that makes total sense to look at the demographics, where people are from, how they live and whatnot, putting that all into the mix. So there's going to be a lot of statistical crunching later on by someone.
Yes.
You, Yikang, or you, Linda? Or have you got someone else to do that?
I will run some analysis.
Okay.
And I'm still very much interested in the normative beliefs. So that's something we also measured in the VR experiment. Normative beliefs, basically how I think other people should behave and how I think that other people expect me to behave. I think that's, when we're talking about social influence, that's a very important aspect of social influence, or like the mechanism of social influence. But regarding the peer network and the co-offending, our collaborator with Jacobson from Maryland, he's very interested in that topic, so I assume he will be the one looking at the results.
Doing the heavy lifting on the results.
Yes.
Okay. And Linda, I want to finish with one question for you. You mentioned that you're currently working with adolescents. Obviously, it's an interesting time in their life, but you could also do this with all kinds of cohorts and age groups, correct?
Yes. So maybe I didn't express myself correctly earlier. We are interested in adolescents. However, we work with already
young adults or emerging adults.
Adults, yes.
Okay, so is it right, adolescents 13 to 18, is that? And then how do you?
So far we've been recruiting participants aged between 18 and 25. Because, of course, adolescents are just really difficult to recruit because if you would like to recruit someone who's underage, you will also need the approval of their legal guardian. And that just makes it very difficult. Also, from an ethical approval point of view, it is even more difficult. Then you need to find the adolescents working together with schools or certain institutions where adolescents are just more frequently are mostly reluctant to do that because, of course, they are a sensitive population.
I see. Okay, so that's something that you could then, maybe though, with these results that you've got, then approach a school and say, or a youth group and say, hey, we've got, this is what we've done. Would you be interested in participating as well?
We would love to do that, definitely.
Okay, but it's a question.
But so far, we just need to work with what is feasible.
Yep.
And that is university students mostly because they're still young, but already above the age of 18.
Okay.
So they can make their decisions on their own.
Okay, and there would also be the option to take it to the other end of the spectrum, away from adolescents to people
who are older
in life. Yeah, that's right. Or is that not so much an interesting area to study for you guys?
Depends. So, of course, I guess it would be interesting. I mean, we're researchers, so we're interested in practically any kind of a social dynamic or anything that we could get our hands onto. However, if you look at, for example, the numbers with regards to co-offending, most co-offending happens in younger age groups. And if you want to say like the more adult criminal will be rather a lone wolf and will refrain from co-offending. So, yeah, I don't know how interesting this will be, but of course it depends also on the type of crime.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, yeah. Okay, but there's definitely method to why you've selected at the moment your current participants 18 to 25.
Yes.
Alrighty. Well, I would say we'll have to wrap it up there, but anyone who wants to know more can certainly get in touch with you over the website. I think you're available. This is the Partners in Crime project, and that's your project, Linda?
This is
the whole all three we talked about today are from Partners in Crime.
Exactly.
Love the name, easy to remember, very good. Yikang, Linda, thanks for coming on to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you'd like to listen to additional podcasts or learn more about our research, visit us at csl.mpg.de.